Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. Kazakhstan has strongly criticized Ukraine following a drone attack on the Black Sea terminal of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, or the CPC, which handles more than 1% of global oil production. Now, the CPC reported that operations were halted after a significant mooring at its terminal was damaged in the Ukrainian naval drone strike. Kazakhstan's foreign ministry has condemned the attack, calling it the third instance of aggression against this civilian facility, which is protected by international law. The ministry has also expressed its concern over what it described as a deliberate strike on critical infrastructure at the port of Novorossiysk. This incident has heightened tensions surrounding the safety of vital energy transport routes. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Gilbert Doctorow. He is a Russian affairs expert joining us from Brussels. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Ukraine now being criticized by Kazakhstan, no less, after the strike on this particular terminal that handles about 1% of the global oil flow. What do you make of these comments by the Kazakh Foreign Ministry, the fact that now one of the Central Asian nations has come out and condemned the strike openly?
Well, maybe 1% of global oil, but it is 80% of Kazakhstan's oil exports. So for Kazakhstan, this damage is extremely serious. There are alternative routes, and they will be used now in the coming days, weeks, and months, so long as it takes time to repair the damage, which apparently was substantial. I call out the fact that this is not the first strike by the Ukrainians against the pipeline that carries Kazakhstan oil across Russian territory into the Black Sea to a Russian port for export to world markets. This, however, is obviously much more successful and much more damaging. I also want to call out something else. You have stated this is a naval drone used by the Ukrainians. Let's be open about it. It is the Brits who are supplying Ukraine with the know-how and perhaps even with the equipment to carry out such strikes. So the question should come back to London. Why are they striking American assets in Kazakhstan?
Interestingly, yes, you have pointed out this is not the first instance. This is, in fact, the third such instance. What impact could such attacks, if continued, have on the supply of oil and the stability of the markets, or even the volatility?
Well, certainly it makes markets nervous when you have an event like this that is so disruptive of a major supplier. However, the regional importance is greater than the global oil market question. For the region, it is striking. It is remarkable that the Ukrainians have chosen to disrupt Kazakhstan oil flows. They also have done some peculiar things with respect to supplies of hydrocarbons reaching Hungary, but Russia-sourced. Here it's not Russia itself that is the victim. It is Kazakhstan and the American owners of the oil and of the part owners of the pipeline. So it is a very peculiar strike. Obviously, Ukraine is keen on being disruptive in the area and demonstrating that it can wreak havoc in the region if its interests are not respected as it goes into peace negotiations.
Indeed. Speaking of the negotiations, and of course I'd like to digress a little bit from this particular strike itself, there is a Ukrainian delegation in the United States of America to in fact further the talks. We've seen discussions earlier in Geneva and Abu Dhabi as well. Amidst all of this, we're also expecting a meeting between Ukrainian President Zelensky and French President Emmanuel Macron. What are your expectations from this meeting? We did see that France has agreed to supply Rafales to Ukraine, but that's more of a long-term project. Can we also expect some announcement with regards to Ukraine's short-term security apparatus?
I think that Macron is looking for every opportunity to present himself as a European leader in providing for defense of Ukraine. And I imagine one of the subjects in his discussion with Zelensky will be the offer that that he has made and the Brits have made, each to supply 5,000 troops to Ukraine as a safeguard, as a tripwire, to ensure that Ukraine is not attacked again after conclusion of peace. That was probably one of the top items. And I have to insist that Europe remains a possible spoiler in the peace negotiations, and that Europe is not helpless, as some people are saying, but Europe can fan the war and keep it going and keep the conflict going if the European leaders like Macron are not put in their place and made to understand that they cannot and should not interfere with what the United States is conducting very seriously as a peace effort.
Indeed, as you pointed out, Macron does have designs to project himself as, the voice of the Europeans as far as this war is concerned. He also has, interestingly, a visit to China lined up very, very shortly. He's likely to rake up the war itself. Although China does not directly supply any weapons to Russia, it has been supplying fiber optic cables, lithium-ion batteries, dual-use items mostly, which are then used by Russia to manufacture drones. China, as we know, is also the largest importer of Russian oil. So these are a couple of things he's likely to rake up. He's also looking at negotiating with them separately for an economic deal as well. How do you think this would go down with the Chinese?
Well, you're looking at substantive issues that would explain and justify Mr. Macron's trip to China. I would look at it differently. Mr. Macron has only 11% support among voters in France. That is the lowest level since Hollande, who was forced not to enter the electoral campaign for presidency upon the fact that he had such miserable ratings. Macron is despised in France. The only place where he can show himself off and claim the microphone is on foreign travel. In that sense, he is in line with Mr. Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, who is being roundly criticized at home and who may be unseated in London because he spends too little time at home, where his activities are not approved by most of the population, and spends a lot of time on foreign travel. So it is with Mr. Macron. The last place he wants to be is in Paris, because there he has to face the daily problems, the loss of 3 successive governments to opposition in parliament, and he has to answer questions of hostile reporters. When he travels abroad, as he is now, as you say, going to China, he can bask in the limelight. He can present himself as a global thinker and mover of events. That is all false, and I do not believe that he will achieve anything of significance in Beijing, because the Chinese know who he is.
Coming back to the peace deal itself and the war, I wanted to understand from you, although the amended draft has not been made public, we do know the first draft that was leaked did highlight that the US is looking at eventually lifting sanctions against Russia on a case-by-case basis, a reinduction of Russia into the augmented G8 as well. What are your expectations? Are these clauses that are likely to be retained? And what are your expectations from, the clause regarding Ukraine ceding territory? Would that also likely to be retained or amended in a certain manner?
I discount the value of the agreements reached between the United States and the negotiating team from Ukraine in Geneva a week ago. I believe that was political theater. Mr. Yermak's dismissal, his forced retirement, changes whole dynamics. But I want to call out that Mr. Trump is very serious about arriving at a peace in this war, more serious than anybody else, certainly more serious than Zelensky, and so I think this will surprise viewers, more serious than Mr. Putin is. And for that reason, I believe that the talks between the Russians and the Americans will proceed on the basis of the original 28-point plan and not on the basis of the revised 19-point plan arrived at after meeting with Yermak and the other members of the Ukrainian delegation in Geneva last week.
All right, so with that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, sharing your perspective and insights as far as these very crucial developments in the war and the peace process